Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Blue Ribbon Lounge podcast.
Welcome back to the Blue Ribbon Lounge podcast, where we give you that knowledge you don't know that you needed, that you wanted, that you didn't know that you needed.
Do you need it? Do you want it? Blue Ribbon Lounge podcast.
Yeah, we'll give it to you like a back alley drug deal.
Hell yeah.
Slip it to you when the cops aren't looking.
Yeah, into your sweet, sweet ear holes.
Yes.
Thanks for joining us today. Great episode. Really happy to do a fan suggestion.
Another fan suggestion.
Yes, thankfully. We love your fan suggestions. You know what? We eventually will get through the list, and we'll always be tacking on more. But it's nice when it's like kind of a sweet surprise.
Right, when someone throws you out a suggestion.
Yeah. This one's from Carmen.
Yes.
T-shirt wearing, podcast listening. Threw out Mayans and Incas.
Yeah?
Yes.
All right.
She had one other one, Atoll.
Atoll?
Yeah, I didn't do that one.
And I didn't notice about that.
But hey, 2 out of 3 ain't bad. Isn't that's a Meatloaf thing? Is 2 out of 3 ain't bad,
right? It's off Bat Out of Hell 1.
Hell yeah. But how have you been, Dave?
Pretty good for the most part.
Pretty good.
Yeah. Nothing exciting. I did do a blind frozen personal pan pizza taste test.
I saw that online. I didn't know it was real. I thought you were just saying words off the top of your head.
Oh.
So tell us about this.
I went to the grocery store and bought a bunch of personal pan pepperoni pizzas.
Okay. Pepperoni.
Yeah. Because cheese, I'm not going to pay for cheese pizza.
Hey, one bite, everybody knows the rules.
What? Bite the crust?
Yeah, we just take one bite. Everybody knows the rules.
Of cheese pizza?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, you ever see that guy? That
Nope.
Dave Portnoy billionaire guy?
No, but I remember when we did our low pies, you're like, you have to bite the crust. It's the rule or something.
Yeah, I think there's no rules.
Oh, okay.
But,
just right.
And I think that's the joke.
Oh, okay. No, so we did like 6 of them. I got a Totino's, a Lots of Matza, DiGiorno's.
Lots of Matza is a good pizza.
Yeah. Home Run Inn.
That, I think, is a piece of shit pizza.
Red Baron, and Screamin' Sicilian.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I would have hoped that the Screamin' Sicilian had the best pepperoni pizza, but Tostino's won?
Yeah. But that's because there was 4 of us, and we were doing 1 through 6.
Okay.
So then you rank the pizza how you liked it,
mm-hmm.
and then at the end revealed which pizza was which.
Okay.
And both the kids gave the Totino's 6.
Hey, they've been around for a long time, man.
It is one of my favorite, but I did like the Screamin' Sicilian. The Lots of Matza was up there.
Well, and you and the missus would have had more pizza in your day, so your palate is a little bit more refined.
Yeah.
And kids are just eating pepperonis.
Yeah, but those Tostinos are not too bad. They do have that like kind of a buttery cracker crust.
I like a crispy crust.
Yeah, but yeah, the Home Run Inn one was garbage.
Yeah,
and
it's just too doughy for me.
And
like I feel like almost flavorless.
Almost. DiGiorno's I'm not a big fan of. I don't like their crust. It's just really? It's too thick.
Yeah,
they're like self-rising, but I'm like, it's too thick. Not good.
Fair.
Yeah.
We had some family down in the lounge the other day, and we were listening to some music, and the wife's nephew was over, and he's a fireball.
Yeah.
And he wanted to bust out a microphone, and he was doing a little karaoke, some stand-up, and he was like, what if Uncle Matt's basement wasn't called, or what if Uncle Matt's podcast wasn't called the Blue Ribbon Lounge podcast? What if it was called the Taco Bell podcast?
The
Taco Bell Lounge podcast. And dude, that kid had me cracking up for 20 minutes on that one.
The Taco Bell Lounge podcast. I could see that. Everything's like run for the border, and there's like bells hanging around. And
yeah. Oh, just tacos all day. Tacos.
Yeah. Taco lights hanging up.
Yeah. Crock pot full of meat and some shells sitting out.
Yeah. Just like at a happy hour at the dive bar.
Oh yeah. You see any good movies lately, Dave?
Ninja Turtles, Mutant Mayhem.
Is that the new cartoon?
Yeah.
Okay.
CG cartoon.
Yeah. Animated.
Yeah, but I mean, it's a cool style because sometimes it almost looked like claymation-ish.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
It kind of, I've only seen the previews, kind of reminded me of the new Spider-Mans.
Kinda, yeah. But it didn't like keep changing styles. It just kind of stuck to one style.
Yeah.
But the story was pretty, I wouldn't say like adult, but I would say like teenager. Like,
oh, what was it rated?
PG.
Okay.
But it was definitely like a hard PG.
Okay.
Because, yeah, sometimes it'd be like, wait, I don't think he just said that. But the main antagonist guy was voiced by Ice Cube.
Oh.
Yeah, and they had Wu-Tang in there.
Oh.
And it was like, oh, baby, I like it raw. I'm like, this is for a kids movie?
That's the best part of kids movies is they don't get the overhead jokes. Like SpongeBob was like that all the time, and
yeah, sometimes they would throw in an adult joke.
Yeah.
But this one was more like they were actually like teenagers. Like you watch a Ninja Turtles movie and they're more like tough and like stoic, and
yeah,
you know, in this one they were actually like goofballs and like teenagers.
I'm assuming they had like cell phones and playing video games and stuff.
Yeah, which was weird because that's the first time I've ever seen where they're like hanging out before bed and they're on the phone and then they try to get by Master Splinter and he's just looking at his cell phone. I'm like, this is very like how people actually are.
Splinter was looking at his cell phone?
Yeah.
That's funny.
Yeah, and they made it a little more urban, but I thought that was cool. I mean, they live in New York.
Yeah.
So, no, but I really liked the story and it was well done.
Excellent. I saw this movie, The Love Witch, and it came out in 2016. It was free on Tubi if you want to watch it. But it was very like late 80s, early 90s looking.
Yeah.
Maybe even early 80s. I'm not huge on like styles. But I couldn't tell. I think it was maybe the way they lit the movie, because everything was crisp like on a new camera, but the way they lit it, and it was like kind of almost like bad acting.
Okay.
Where everybody just kind of had tones that they delivered their lines, a lot of looking into the camera and being like, no. It was kind of a detective movie where gal killing a bunch of guys and the detective comes after her.
Okay.
It was pretty good though. I recommend it.
So it was good, kind of almost cheese.
Yes.
Okay.
And if you're a Wiccan, you probably really love it.
Yeah, it's
probably rated R. There's a little bit of nudity.
Okay.
And then I also ran across this movie called The Endless. And that was free on YouTube right now. It came out in 2018.
As long as you have an account.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because it's age restricted.
Oh, okay. But you don't have to have like premium.
No, you just have to log in to verify your age. So you have to have a Google account or however you log into YouTube.
Oh, okay. And I guess I'm always logged in, so I guess I don't know that.
Yeah, and I never.
But it was very like Call of Cthulhu-y.
Okay.
Where people were getting stuck in time vortexes and shit like that. And kind of about a cult. But it was a good movie too. I just kind of stumbled upon both of them. They were pretty good.
Yeah?
Yeah.
That's cool.
The wife was more interested in The Love Witch, but
yeah,
I was able to catch it when she would watch it.
That's good. It's fun when you can get one that you can watch together.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've been watching a lot of like weird documentary type stuff.
Okay.
Like Expelled, which was Ben Stein, and it's about how what do you call it? The origins of life kind of thing. But not like Darwin, but like, okay, well, we all came from one cell, and like then there was a spark, but scientists don't really know what caused the spark to happen.
And Ben Stein like narrated it, or
no? He was like the narrator, the guy walking around talking to all the people, doing the interviews and stuff.
Oh, okay.
And yeah, but his angle was about divine intervention kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And he wasn't per se like pushing like the, you know, like a religious message, but anytime there was a scientist that was like, okay, well, we don't know, well, what about this hypothesis? and then they would get blacklisted, and then nobody would listen to anything they had to say or take their studies seriously. And he's like, okay, but you can be a scientist and you can say that an alien came down here and spit in some muck, and that started our life, and you're not going to get laughed at for that.
Yeah.
So he was just kind of like,
Yet I feel like more and more I hear now that the science community is very politicized.
yeah, because he also talked about a lot about like Darwinism and stuff, and I have some stuff here later that I can get into about that.
Okay.
And then I watched What the Bleep Do You Know? Have you heard of that one? It's about quantum physics.
Okay.
And how how quantum physics works, and how nothing ever touches, and how you're mostly made up of space, and how molecules are only what they are if someone perceives them to be that way, kind of thing.
Have you ever seen I Heart Huckabees?
Yeah.
That part where they're like talking about, your body is made up of smaller particles, and in between those particles is space. But then in between that space is just even smaller particles, but those smaller particles have space between them, but that space is filled with smaller particles, and it was a head trip of a movie.
Yeah.
Is that Wes Anderson?
That is not Wes Anderson.
Okay.
No, but it's kind of like talking about that stuff and how physics is weird and how we don't fully understand it. And then it goes into some woo kind of stuff where they they show like water molecules, and ones that are like just out of a stream, one that was blessed by a monk, one that was like given daily affirmations, and then one that on the thing it just says like I hate you, and shows you how they look different, kind of like snowflakes.
Oh, okay.
Depending on like what's going on with them.
Yeah. Vibes and energy.
Yeah, so it was a little bit woo, and I think some of the people they interviewed, like if you do a deep dig into it, are kind of woo kind of people.
Yeah.
So take it with a grain of salt, but it's a good like thought experiment kind of movie to check out.
Okay, cool. I'll check that out. What the bleep do you know?
Yeah, and bleep is like all like how you would like bleep out a curse word.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I'll check that out. Yeah, that was pretty much all I did while we were gone.
Yeah. It's just been hot, so
it has been hot.
Indoor and air conditioner
I got a new pod dog.
Was that your dog?
Yeah.
Oh, I thought you were like dog sitting.
Oh no, that's our dog.
Oh, cool.
Picked her up. So me and the wife have been talking about dogs for a little while now, and she wanted to make time to schedule to go to some shelters. And then like 2 days before that, some girl's like, "Hey, I got this dog. Do you want it?" And there's no such thing as a free dog, because we had to get shots and then got to get it spayed. And
yeah.
But she's quiet, not barking right now. Lays down a lot. Been trying to go for walks. A little skittish, but
yeah, it's a new place.
Yeah, we picked that dog up out of its whole world and transported it across time and space.
Yeah, and stuck it in this new place.
Yeah, full of cats. So one podcat is fearless of her. Her name is Dolly, and then the newest dumb podcat has migrated to the basement.
Oh, okay.
So maybe we'll see him down here. I don't know.
Is that the black and white one?
Yeah.
Yeah, he was already skittish.
Yeah, he was.
All right.
And that's my world.
That's your world?
Now travel back through time and space to ancient civilizations, Dave?
Sure. And
do you want to go first with some of yours? I know the Mayans actually came before the Inca.
They might have.
They did. That's what my timeline says. I didn't write much down about it.
The Olmec actually kind of came before both of them, and they think that they're the ones that kind of spread their culture to the Incans and the Mayas, because they're very similar. It's just how their headdresses, and there's like slight differences.
Yeah, shout out to Temple of Doom. You ever watch that TV show it was like a game show on
Secrets of the Hidden Temple?
Oh, that one. Yeah. Oh, Temple of Doom is maybe Indiana Jones.
That is Indiana Jones. But the Olmec were actually one of those a lost civilization also.
And did I see that they there was a couple of their temples or structures that was like filled in on purpose?
Maybe there was one culture that did just like bury their stuff and leave.
Yeah.
I think it was them, because then they dug up, they had like these huge heads that they carved.
I think that's right.
Yeah, and they really don't know what happened to them, besides the like it looked like they defaced their own stuff and like buried stuff in. And one of the speculations is that because it's volcanic basalt or whatever that they carved their heads out of, they had magnetic properties.
Oh.
And that some of their art and stuff showed people with like these headdresses with like squares on them. And then they found a bunch of like these magnetic little squares made out of basalt. So they thought maybe they were like using it as healing practices or something. But then also, if you get a high enough jolt of electromagnetic like current through you, it can actually cause like seizures and like mess up your brain waves.
Yeah, they could have, and then at that time, if something like that were to happen, they think that maybe the land got cursed or something.
Yeah, or if it makes them sick, and then they're like, oh, and so they destroy everything, and like, this is bad juju.
Yeah,
the gods are mad.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But then the Mayans were 1900 BC or BCE, which is before current era, to 830 AD or CE, is when they're...
Oh, CE. I heard CE earlier in my research, and I was like, what the fuck is that? Current era.
Yeah.
I'm used to just AD,
Yeah, but, that's
politically
that's
correct
religious
now.
or whatever. But that's when they thrived, and they domesticated corn, beans, squash, chili peppers, and the caca bean or chocolate.
Ooh.
Well,
Oh, right.
caca, I guess is what it's called, not caca. But they were the Mayans. They built huge temples in the tropical forests of Honduras and southern Mexico and Belize and Guatemala. And there's like a peninsula down there, and I think it's the Yucatan Peninsula, which is like the little hump at the bottom of...
It's like it makes Mexico look like a little boot.
Yeah. And they pretty much... there was the highlands, which were the Andes, and then there were the lowlands, which is all of that Yucatan Peninsula.
Mm-hmm.
And they pretty much set up shop, and then there was Tikal, which had the biggest temple, which was 220 stories, and
220 stories.
no, 22 stories.
Oh, 22 stories.
Yeah, and they said that like see, in my research there was like 50,000 people lived in that area, and then there's one that said 500,000 people lived in there, and then one said it was like 15 million, but I think they meant like total Mayans altogether, because they all pretty much lived on that peninsula.
Mm-hmm. But the peninsula is huge.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's pretty big. But it's not really that huge, because they were all just like little it was like city-states and like kingdoms, I guess you would call it.
Yeah.
Because there was Tikal, and then the next one was Calicumal, or yeah.
A lot of great words in this episode.
Yeah, I'll go with that.
I tried to type everything out so like phonetically.
Yeah.
I was like, I'm not going to get that spelling.
And they would have different kinds of wars, and one of them, and pretty much one was just more like symbolic. Like they'd run in there and capture some people so they can go over here and then sacrifice them and be like, we're good, we got the power. And then there'd be all out like wars where they would go over there and then like try to get rid of them.
Mm-hmm.
And so they would do these little skirmishes, and then Tikal actually hooked up with the Incans because they had better jade or whatever they had.
Okay.
And because it was like stronger, and so then they could make weapons out of it and stuff. And they actually showed how there was like pottery where it was like one side of it, if you like follow the wrapping, was like the Mayans, and then on the other side was the Incans, and in the middle, like it was like them coming together.
Oh,
where like
okay.
one was like shows the architecture of the Incans, and one shows the architecture of the Mayas, and in the middle the architecture is like combined. So they didn't know if maybe Tikal rose to power because they had like a superpower backing them. Because I mean, that's your part, but I guess the Incas were kind of like the United States, where they would like to branch out and try to like conduct business or control business that their neighbors are doing.
Yeah, from what I had heard in my research, it was a lot like the Ottoman Empire or the Persian Empire, where they would just like kind of sweep through areas, and those who didn't, surrender, they would just trample and absorb.
Yeah.
So yeah, the Incas were established around 1438, and they ended up being one of the Western Hemisphere's largest empires with a population of approximately 10 million. They inhabited a land of approximately 370,000 miles. And so, just to give you an idea of how big that is, Texas is approximately 270,000 square miles.
Okay.
But their civilization stretched all along the western side of South America, along the countries of Colombia, Ecuador, Peru, Bolivia, Chile, and Argentina. And if you were to take it like from top to bottom of that, it was said that you could stretch the empire from New York almost to LA.
Yeah, and there's also the Cahokia mounds right off of St. Louis.
Oh, okay.
And even though they're earthen mounds, a lot of the structures and stuff look very similar to like the Incan and the Mayas. And their biggest commodity was like squash and corn and stuff like that. So the archaeologists they don't really know about North American history that much, because that's a whole nother story. But it kind of seems like if maize was originated in Mexico and then crossbred to make corn, like the corn we know today, they must have been like doing some kind of trade.
Yeah.
Because there was also like mounds and stuff found like in New Orleans and in Kentucky. So it's kind of like they kind of like traveled up and then went kind of up the Mississippi, but not necessarily like taking over or like actual having like Incas up here, but like they're like, you do trade on the border, you go back home, you trade what you learned from them, and they trade, and it kind of sneaks its way up. Yeah,
when I was researching this, I was imagining what it would have been like from when potentially people walked from like Africa through China, Russia type area over the Bering Strait. Is that what that's called?
Yeah.
And then I would imagine, as a people, you would follow the coastline for the most part, being able to find food in the water and things like that.
Yeah.
And that would explain why, you get down to Mexico and it narrows out and you can kind of see both sides of the continent. And then you would continue south to go to this area where the Incas established. And then as people, branched off and wanted to do their own thing, you'd travel more inland of America and South America.
Yeah. But there's also arguments because like the Olmec, the big carved heads that they looked more like Polynesian.
Okay.
Like, so maybe, I mean, if they're out there floating around finding islands to like populate and colonize, why wouldn't they land in, the New World, as they called it?
Yeah, that's true.
And then kind of like start little colonies here.
For sure. Yeah, some of the stuff I found when I was researching the Incas, so their land was known as the Tahuantinsuyo, or the Four Quarters, having governors within each of the territories. And so they had a pretty big like social structure, and that's how they were able to collect essentially taxes and stuff like that. And
like offerings, pretty much. Like the farmers would grow their corn and then have to offer it up to, feed the royals or the whatever you call
leadership.
The leadership.
And a lot of these groups were hunter-gatherers, and so they didn't always have a whole ton of food. And so they would actually, instead of donating resources, they would end up donating hard labor.
Yeah.
And that was one big thing about the Incas, is they made most of their territory within the Andes Mountains, really steep mountains, really tall. And a lot of the things that you can see if you go to there even today is they built roads, canals, temples, and lots of cities. They did all of this without draft animals like horses or ox. They didn't have the wheel.
Yeah, or arches. Like,
they didn't do arches?
No.
Oh, well, you know what? Yeah, I just saw a lot of like stones sitting on top of, like two piles of stones with a bigger stone on top.
Yeah.
And they also didn't have metal tools or a written language.
Well, because the Mayas were the same way, because they didn't have like work animals or draft animals. But I think the Aztec actually would use
Aztec?
Yeah, the Aztec would use llamas and stuff in some parts.
Yeah, the Incas would use llamas,
especially in the Andes and stuff. That, like,
they're not very big though.
No,
they're not as powerful as ox, or
right.
They're probably stronger than people, I guess I would imagine.
I mean, you
get like 30 of them.
2 bundles of sticks, in the baskets on either side. You ever seen The Emperor's New Groove?
Yeah. And with this lack of technology, really, like they didn't have iron or steel tools. I think they did use a lot of brass. Brass and silver and gold is what they had a lot of. Silver and gold would be too soft for any sort of working.
Yeah.
But bronze, did I say brass? I meant bronze. Bronze was like some of the first swords and tools like that.
Yeah. They said a lot of flint is what the Mayas would use, because it was harder than the sandstone or like limestone that was like that whole peninsula was made out of.
Okay.
And they also figured out how to make stucco.
Okay.
By like chopping up the limestone and then setting it on fire pretty much, and making like a mush or slush out of it with like all the ashes and stuff. And then they would plaster their temples and stuff with that, and then paint it like different colors. And they also were really good at, everything's lined up to the stars, but then they'd also make sure that they had a slant to them, because that Yucatan Peninsula is not, it's just tropical forest. It's not rainforest. So like the soil is really thin and it doesn't necessarily rain all the time. So when it did rain, they had to collect it somewhere. So they made a big like hole and then plastered it and put clay on it so the water wouldn't soak in, and then all the runoff from all these buildings they were making would go collect into the pool.
Oh, that's super cool.
Yeah, because it was like that limestone, it's really porous, so there was no real rivers or anything, because it would just all soak into the ground.
Yeah. Well, and it's kind of the opposite for the Incas. So they're one of their big, not really a city, but it was most likely built as like a royal retreat, was in Machu Picchu, and that was in Cusco, Peru. So it's kind of thought to have had, a year or more worth of planning, because they have a bunch of canals built to take a lot of the water from the rain system in the summer and funnel it into the city. But then more than that, the whole city is built kind of on a bedrock of like used gravel. So like as they were making these stones for their structures, they would keep all the gravel separate, and that's what they built this area on, so that this area in the Andes, it would get all all the clouds and stuff would come up from the rainforests in Brazil.
Yeah.
And they would hit the Andes, but they're being so tall, it would just dump. And so this area would get like 6 inches of water every year, which is actually kind of a lot. And so all that water would go into the, it's almost like building a retaining wall.
Yeah.
You put gravel behind it so that all the water can soak down and it's not just pushing against your wall.
Your structure, yeah.
And as well as that within their cities, they also built tons of roads going as far as carving, like shearing pieces of mountain in and flattening it out to be able to walk across.
Yeah.
Also like boring holes through the mountain, which I don't know exactly how you do that with only stone and soft metal tools, but
take a lot of time.
Yeah.
And they're starting to find out now that the Mayas had roads and stuff like that because they're doing like LiDAR or something.
Yeah,
the
from
laser,
like helicopters and planes.
Yeah, shooting lasers and it goes through the trees, but it bounces back off the ground.
Yeah,
and so
that's pretty cool.
They're able to map it out, and they're like, "Whoa, there's a lot more here than we thought," because like the jungle just grows back so fast.
Yeah. Well, and was it the Mayans that were like you said, the earth wasn't really plentiful for growing, so they would clear out a bunch of land, burn it to get that natural resources into the ground. And I don't know if you already said this or not, but then they would use that up as best they can and move the plot to another area, do the same thing.
Yeah, it's called like hack and slash farming.
Yeah.
Where you hack down a bunch of the forest, and you can either it's like clear cutting. Mm-hmm. And then you use it, and then you let it grow back, and while you use a different plot. But the Mayan culture actually grew so much, and they had so many people on that little peninsula that at least the whole thing was pretty much clear cut because they were also using the hardwoods to burn to make the stucco. So they had all these stucco pits, and since corn doesn't really pack a lot of nutrition, you have to eat more of it.
Yeah.
And so
and you only get like one corn per stalk.
Yeah.
It's actually a super inefficient vegetable.
Yeah. Well, they say even the most inefficient farmer in the Midwest, he can supply food for himself and 150 people. They said down there a farmer could supply food for himself and 5 people.
Oh.
So they needed so much land.
Every 5th person had to be a farmer or whatever.
Yeah. And then with the kind of infighting, the Calmac Mool fighting against Tikal, and then there's other ones, all around. And then you couple that with the Incas trying to put influence in there too. And then there was a drought, and since they don't really have the water, everything's clear cut. They're having trouble trying to find food for everybody. And then so they start having revolts. Nothing was ever fortified, but then they started to fortify stuff near the end of their reign, and they figure it's probably because there was a bigger gap between the poverty and the kings and the leaders. And so there was a bunch of infighting, and then eventually there was just nothing. So nobody wanted to live on this clear-cut, hot, gross place where the king is up there trying to kill people to get it to rain, and you're forget this.
Yeah. And a lot of that type of thing, because the Incas would have a lot of droughts too, and their infrastructure, actually they created the ability to freeze dry food, and they also built a lot of grain storage bins.
Yeah.
So they had planned often to have to survive droughts.
Yeah.
And did we touch on the pirate episode that it was potentially a point in time where not a lot of hurricanes were happening? It was a specific time in the the weather happenings.
Oh, okay.
And that's why so many people could be out on boats at one time, and that's why
there wasn't a lot of storms.
Yes. And I can't remember exactly why that was, but I wonder if that's why also these places were getting, less rain than usual. And maybe it was like the climate's always changing.
Yeah, I think there was like a cooling period and then it heated up and like there was kind of more rain, but then it kind of tapered off. Yeah, like a fluctuation kind of thing.
Yeah, and so I wonder if that was kind of all part of the same type of time period.
Yeah, because I touched on it before, but the Cahokia tribes or like they were also called the Mississippian culture.
Oh, okay.
And right outside of St. Louis is like one of the biggest mound structures, like earthen mounds in pretty much north of Mexico. And
did we talk about that on a past episode?
I think I talked about it because I went there with my mom.
Oh, okay.
And we walked up there, and it was like, I might not make it down to Peru or somewhere and be able to walk on these like Incan or Maya temples, but I got to walk on these, and it was pretty cool. But they also like, it's right there where the Mississippi and the Missouri join, so it's like a big floodplain, and so floodplains lead to fertile soil.
Yeah.
And so they kind of set up there, and they also had like a big boom. They had like 10 to 20,000 people live in the city, and then 10 to 20,000 people living like in the suburbs around the city. Okay. And they had like over hundreds of mounds that they made. And the biggest one was called Monk's Mound because there were actually some monks like when they were doing missionary work that actually set up on the mound. And went through the same boom and bust situation because when you're just eating corn and hunting, they had a lot of hunting because they still were like the natives of America that you would think from before. They just started to run out of food, and then people start fighting because the resources aren't there, and then so people are just kind of peace out because there was like a whole drought thing happening at that time. Yeah.
Another interesting thing I found about the Incas was they didn't have a written language, but they used this way of having knots on ropes.
The Mayas had like a hieroglyphic kind of situation, and the first people or like scientists that went through to explore it didn't really notice, but they kind of did. They're like, this looks similar to like Egyptian kind of hieroglyphics. But the reason sometimes when they say that these places don't have written language is because like the people who conquered or came through would burn their history.
Yeah.
Like there was a missionary with the Roman Catholic Church named Diego de Landa. And this was like the Incas or the Mayans dispersed after they clear cut all the forest and there was a drought and everything. And they said by the time the conquistadors showed up, that forest just got back to being a forest.
Oh, okay.
Like just. And so they're going through and they see, all these Mayans and stuff living in smaller, tribes. And this guy's going through and trying to teach them Christianity.
Yeah.
And then he sees that they're still practicing their old ways. So he actually had a big, like, Spanish kind of Inquisition in the United States and, like, pulled them into, like, a big, like, courtyard and hung a bunch of them and then rounded up all of their materials and all of their, like, any kind of written stuff they had about their religion, about their past, about anything, and had a huge bonfire and set it all on fire just to destroy any kind of remnants of anything that they had before, because he was like, nope, you're Christians now.
That's crazy.
And it's kind of like backfired a little bit, because the reason that we know that they had hieroglyphics and that they could figure out how to read these things is because in his diaries, he kept a good track of what they were doing and how they did it and how they're heathens, and wrote down their alphabet and everything, and pretty much calling them stupid, but also kept a record of what they were doing. So then fast forward, archaeologists can use his diary to then figure out what really happened to the Mayans. And that's why, because for the longest time, people were like, it's a lost civilization. We have no idea, because everything got burnt by these missionaries. And so then when you look at the stuff, they're like, oh, who built these? Where did they go? We don't know. And it's actually, we did know, but then someone set it all on fire, and then we forget.
Yeah.
And yeah,
that was a lot of what happened in 1524. The Spanish conquistadors started landing in the Caribbean, and though they hadn't met yet with the Incan civilization because they were on the complete other side of the continent, many people would carry the diseases of smallpox they would be trying to escape the Spanish conquistadors, or maybe they just traveled, and they would show up to the Inca settlements, and this ended up killing like millions of Incas, two of which included the ruler at the time, Huayna Capac, and his heir, creating a power vacuum. And that created two brothers of the dead ruler to start a civil war. That civil war also killed a bunch of people.
Yeah.
And so now their whole empire is super weakened. Also, the civil unrest weakens the structure of everything. And then by 1532, the Spanish conquistadors finally made it to the Incan empires, and they had brought swords and guns and cannons and horses, along with more disease. So though the conquistadors, led by Francisco Pizarro, were greatly outnumbered, they were like 260 men.
Yeah.
Versus, I want to say 100,000 Incas, or at least the people within their group now after the disease and the infighting. So Pizarro scheduled a meeting with the current Inca leader Atahualpa in the center of the city of Cajamarca. When the Incas arrived, they had an army of over 10,000 strong, and they walked right into Pizarro's trap, and he let go a hail of cannon fire, which cut all the Inca warriors down. Not all of them, but it devastated them. They had never even seen a cannon. And then they came in on horseback, which they had never seen either.
Right.
And their cavalry killed a bunch of them. The Inca warriors lost about 7,000 people. The Spanish warriors, the Spanish conquistadors, lost none.
Oh.
Yeah. After that initial attack, the Incas fled, and as Pizarro gave chase, he started rallying the conquered subjects of the Incas to come to the Spanish cause. And it only took about a year after that first attack for the Spanish to destroy the Inca civilization. And they had also, stolen a bunch of their treasure and artifacts, melted it down into gold bars.
Yeah.
And burned a bunch of their stuff. Over the few years that the Spanish started landing on the shores near South America, it's estimated that 6 million people died.
Oh,
yeah, mostly from the Civil War and the plague.
Yeah.
And then eventually the attacks.
Right. They said that, the whole disease kind of leads before the people even get there, so it kind of thins them out.
Yeah.
Initially to begin with. And the Mississippian culture and the mound builders in the North America, they were pretty much the Mississippi Valley area all the way to I want to say Pittsburgh.
Okay. Wow.
And then as far, the Dakotas and stuff like that, they didn't really get into the Rockies too much because it's the Rockies. But then, there's also they called them ancestral Puebloan, and they would carve into the sides of canyons these huge communal houses, which were pretty much apartment buildings.
That's cool.
That they could climb up and down and through and everything. And it was huge structures that they were making. And but when we bought all that land through the Louisiana Purchase, and then they started like sending people out to go cultivate the land and like expand the territories. They came up with Manifest Destiny, which pretty much was like they wanted to spread the special virtues of the American people and their institutions. It was the mission of the United States to redeem and remake the West in the image of the agrarian East, which is like when your money comes from agriculture.
Mm-hmm.
And it was an irresistible destiny to accomplish this essential duty. And they were like sending these people out and being like, you know, go claim your land, go take your land because we're doing what's right and we're the right people. And it just so happened that it was also when Darwin's thing was starting to come around.
Mm-hmm.
And so they were like, no, they're savages. We're smart. We need to be the ones to take on the thing. And so as like early scientists or archaeologists are out there exploring these mounds and checking stuff out, the powers that be are also like, we don't want to hear that they're a sophisticated race. Nobody cared. And so a lot of their structures and mounds actually got like plowed through or knocked down to build like cities or to like grow crops. And back in the day when people were exploring, it wasn't uncommon to come across these structures. And a lot of people would have one of these structures on their property until they would just bulldoze it down or flatten it out to make way for progress.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot, yeah. And we know how we moved all the Indians around in territories and different things. So of course a lot of their stuff got lost.
Yeah, apologies for that.
Yeah,
from this white man.
Yeah, I apologize too, because that's also like that's stuff that people don't even know about. Like,
yeah, because it doesn't behoove them to know.
Yeah, and like I mean, you kind of hear like, oh, there's some mounds up in Grand Mound, and they look like bears. Isn't that cool? But then you're like, but there's this huge like pyramid that they built, you know, down by St. Louis, and these huge carved out like structures in the canyons and stuff. But they're just like, oh no, they were just, you know, and shot bows and arrows. They were just, you know, savages.
Well, and don't we have something kind of like that? Is it in west of us in Illinois, where it's like where native groups would get together and cook? It's like a bunch of big, tall fireplaces.
Oh no, that's white man stuff.
Oh, land.
Yeah, because those are limestone kilns.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, for making different things, stucco and stuff. Yeah,
I tried.
I've seen it. I know what you're talking about. It looks cool. But
it does look cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, and kind of similar to that, after the disease and the infighting and the wars, the Inca people were all but obliterated, and so they didn't have this structure for trade anymore. They didn't have the need for, you know, kings' getaway palaces. So structures like the Machu Picchu, the built in the mountains, ended up not being necessary for years, and so it got grown over, and nobody really cared about it because they were busy now farming and worshiping God and being good Christians, until July 24th, 1911. Hiram Bingham, a Yale-funded explorer, made Machu Picchu famous again while looking for Vilcabamba, which was where the Incas made their last stand.
Yeah. And
so that was kind of like the last thing in the record books. So he was trying to find that. He went down to South America talking to people, and a local farmer was like, I don't know if he didn't know where Vilcabamba was, but he was like, oh, there's some ruins up high in this mountain. And he kind of wish-washed. Bingham kind of wish-washed about going to see it. He wasn't sure if the guy was kind of exaggerating, if it was just like one small row of bricks or something, you know, some destroyed temple.
Right.
So he went up there and took some pictures. And at the time, he was on a mission to find this other area. Not until he got back did he realize that kind of the gravity of what he had found again.
Right.
And in 1912, National Geographic funded him to go explore it more. While there, Bingham ended up taking a bunch of treasure and relics from Machu Picchu. And the Peruvian government had to be like, hey, you can take these, but you can't have them for longer than 18 months, and we want them back.
Yeah.
Well, Bingham ended up putting him in the Yale Peabody Museum for over 100 years until the Peruvian government had to sue the college to get him back.
Jeez.
So yeah, this kind of like brings up the idea of like an Indiana Jones type lost temple, lost civilization type thing. And it's like between them maybe not keeping as many records themselves, but also having, you know, Europeans come in and destroy everything.
Yeah.
And the disease itself, it was like kind of inevitable for it to get lost, especially to people who don't live down there. You know, the farmer may have stumbled across it and was like, whatever, you know, I got to go grow my crops.
Yeah.
It's not important to him.
Right.
And it's not important for us to stumble upon. So it just seems so far away that it kind of has this air of, you know, like a long time ago. But now this, in Machu Picchu, it's like a tourist destination, and like 100,000 people visit every year.
Yeah. It's crazy how they do that. Yeah, because those Mayan temples weren't rediscovered until 1695, and that was just from a monk, because he was actually running away from some other Mayans that he was trying to teach.
Yeah.
And they were like, nope. And then he wrote about it in his journal, and then it wasn't until like the 1900s where somebody actually went out there and like explored like all of them and had this artist like make all these detailed drawings.
That's cool.
And like actually got it into the zeitgeist again, because otherwise it was just sitting there. And they're always like, well, why did they build them in the middle of the jungle? And like, no, actually the jungle grew up around, like reclaimed all this stuff, because it was 1695 and they collapsed in 1195. So there's 500 years of just like stuff growing back.
Yeah. And so another thing, and I don't know if you had any of this for the Mayans, but very similar to like the Egyptian pyramids.
Yeah.
They used a lot of big interlocking stones with no mortar in between them.
Yeah.
And that was a lot of because that area is a lot of earthquakes, and bricks set with mortar tend to erode the mortar and become unstable. But bricks just fitted together, they'll shake, but they won't, you know, slide off of each other because they won't become unbalanced.
Yeah.
But a lot of people, you know, kind of ask if they didn't have, you know, wheels to move big things around, or if they didn't have metal tools to cut them, how did they do it? And it is a good question. I don't know if it's aliens or not, but
yeah. Well, the Mayans used slabs, and they would set up like a grid, and then fill in the grid with like gravel and stuff, and just like, and then put another slab on top of it, and then do it again. So they're actually like, they have weight and they have mass, but to be able to do it, they just have to move a slab, and then they just fill it with gravel, and then put another slab on top of it. And then some of it they'd also leave hollow so they could bury people and have little ceremony like places, because it was all pretty much like how people had power is how much spectacle they could do. Like if they could make the biggest spectacle, you know, if they walk up the temple when the sun's right behind them during the solstice, and they cut their legs and have a bloodletting, and then walk down this beautiful palace with blood while they're booming their voices out because everything's echoing on this stucco.
It would please the gods.
This is a pretty big spectacle.
Yeah.
It'd also be fun to watch.
Oh, yeah. You ever see that, is it 10,000 BC? Is that who's that racist guy?
Oh, you're talking about Apocalyptica?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, 10,000 BC was, I don't think that one was good.
It came out the same time.
Yeah.
And it was a little bit different.
Yeah, but
Apocalyptica.
That one's good.
That's a good flick.
Yeah, it is.
That's all I had for my notes, Dave.
Yeah, that's all I had. I just kind of added the North American ones up there too because they were doing the same thing just with dirt.
Yeah.
Because it's a lot to have a quarry in the States. You either need the rock right there or you got to dig for it.
Yeah.
And back then they were just like, no, we can just pile up dirt.
I think ancient peoples are cool. Even Native Americans aren't that old, only a few hundred years, if anything. But
no, they were back during the same time.
Well, I mean, like the time ending.
Oh yeah, well, I mean, like the Cahokia Mounds, they say it was from like 10,000 AD or CE to 1350.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
And so that was only 300 years before people started coming over here.
Yeah, that's cool. A good episode. Another one in the books.
Yeah.
Thanks again, Carmen, for the suggestion.
Yeah, thanks for the suggestion. This was a fun one to look up. It was just a little disappointing that it wasn't aliens that zapped them away.
Yeah.
And then once you actually do your research and you're like,
oh, it's more white people.
Yeah, I'm sure in the 70s it was more like, we don't know. But now with technology and actual people who are, doing their research and not just like,
Yeah, and I bet like translating things easier, the planes being able to use the LiDAR.
Yeah.
The technology makes things way easier, and we got it now.
Everybody's more connected, so if you had to track someone down who maybe knew a story or his great-grandpa told him a thing or has a diary, it's easier to get all that.
Yeah, and you bring that up, and it's like some guy just kind of learning about it doesn't have to go and find all these people again. He can read another guy's book or blog post or, that stuff's so accessible now. To be able to catch yourself up and then continue. Yeah,
because you can shoot someone an email before you'd have to write him a letter and then get him to fill you in on what he knew. And but now it's like it's a lot easier and quicker.
Well, hope you guys enjoyed it. Hope you're doing well. Keep those suggestions coming. We really appreciate it. And don't forget, be good to yourselves.
Yes, and remember what Albert Einstein said, life is like riding a bicycle. To keep your balance, you must keep moving.
Hey, look at that.